The training dome shimmered with holographic banners of a dozen worlds, each representing a species bound together under the Galactic Defense Alliance. Rows of recruits stood in the simulated desert, their polymer armor gleaming, their plasma rifles humming with contained energy. They were young, loud, and utterly certain of their superiority. At the center of the field, a museum display case held something different, a long, dull weapon of blackened steel, its design almost crude compared to the sleek alien armaments. The recruits laughed at it. An ancient combustion device, hissed a crystalline officer from Varrus. It used controlled explosions to throw bits of metal. How barbaric! Even the instructor chuckled. This, cadets, is an example of pre-energy warfare. Human soldiers once used these before they joined the galactic community. Imagine fighting with such inefficiency. The laughter swelled, echoing through the dome. Behind them, a figure stood silently, arms crossed, wearing dusty tan fatigues instead of the synthetic alloys common to the Alliance. His name Patch read Hale. The lines on his face suggested experience carved deep by time and heat, the kind of where no simulation could replicate. When the laughter died down, Marcus Hale stepped forward. That inefficient weapon, he said evenly, was designed to keep firing after you've dropped it in mud, sand, or blood. It never overheated, never locked up, and it sure as hell didn't care if the power grid went down. The instructor bristled. Sergeant Hale, you were brought here as a historical observer, not a lecturer. Funny, Marcus muttered, eyes still on the display. Because history has a habit of teaching lessons people think they're too smart to learn. The recruits exchanged puzzled glances. The crystalline officer leaned toward his companion and whispered, "Do humans always sound like they're narrating tragedies?" Marcus ignored them. He had seen real deserts, not simulations. The holographic dunes around them were clean and predictable. Real sand clogged everything. Real heat melted circuits. Real war didn't care how elegant your technology looked. Later, in the debriefing chamber, the Alliance's senior officers projected maps of a frontier world named Varrus. A swirl of amber and storm icons dominated the hologram. "The Kroth offensive has begun here," said Commander Arel. "Energy surges and electromagnetic anomalies make combat operations difficult, but our technology will adapt." Marcus frowned. "You sure about that?" Arel gave him a thin smile. Human pessimism noted. "Our weapons have automatic calibration systems. There's no need to concern yourself with outdated tactics." Marcus leaned forward, voice low but steady. "You're fighting in an environment that kills electronics on contact. Your rifles rely on energy cells and precision cooling arrays. Out there, when those fail, you'll have nothing left but your fingers." Snickers rippled through the officers' ranks. One muttered, "Perhaps the human will throw bullets at the enemy." Marcus stood. "You think your war is clean. It isn't. When the Kroth jam your systems and your rifles die, I hope you remember that barbaric thing in the museum." He walked out before anyone could respond. Outside, the artificial sun dimmed to simulate dusk. Marcus sat on a bench overlooking the recruit field, where soldiers practiced perfect formations with energy weapons that glowed like toys. He thought of the weight of a steel rifle in his hands, the smell of burnt propellant, the thunderous rhythm of mechanical fire that never failed him. The galaxy had traded reliability for spectacle. Somewhere beyond those stars, real war was coming. And when it arrived, Marcus Hale suspected the Alliance would learn that progress without pragmatism was just another way to die. He smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "Let's see how long your toys last in the sand," he murmured. The desert simulation hummed on, blissfully unaware. The desert of Varrus greeted the arriving battalion with a furnace blast of heat that seemed to claw straight through armor seals. Marcus Hale stepped off the shuttle behind the recruits and felt the familiar sting of airborne grit on his face, the first honest sensation he had experienced since joining the Alliance. Around him, aliens shuffled with uncertain steps, their luminous rifles humming with unfounded confidence. He watched their eyes sweep the horizon as if expecting the planet to congratulate them for showing up. Varrus offered no such courtesy. It only waited to break them. Within minutes of a landing, the first warning signs emerged. A sudden magnetic ripple rolled across the dunes like an invisible wave, rattling every piece of advanced equipment. The crystalline officer from training lifted his rifle and frowned as the coils flickered. "Minor instability," he said, tapping the side panel. "The calibration system will compensate." Marcus didn't bother responding. He simply watched the rifle's glow die as if snuffed by an unseen hand. The officer stared at it, confused rather than afraid, as though malfunctions were a theoretical inconvenience rather than a battlefield reality. More ripples followed, stronger each time, until the entire platoon found themselves surrounded by the sound of energy cells whining in protest. A scout vehicle attempted to activate its sensor array, and the dome collapsed into sparks. The driver cursed, slapping at the control panel with growing panic. The dunes answered with a distant series of metallic pops. Marcus recognized gunfire before any of the others. To them, the sound was alien, too crude, too physical, too undeniably real. "Cover!" Marcus shouted, grabbing the nearest recruit and dragging him behind a ridge. The aliens hesitated, their instincts shaped by sterile simulations rather than survival. Then the first slug whistled past, punching a fist-sized crater into the sand, and they scrambled after him. Shapes moved along the horizon, lean figures with dark armor and simple, brutal rifles that spat metal rather than light. The Croth attacked with confidence, knowing every electromagnetic surge rendered Alliance weapons ornamental. Plasma rifles refused to charge. Antimatter carbines displayed cascading error codes. Shield belts collapsed into dead weight. The platoon was left holding silent toys, while their enemies advanced with relentless precision. Fear spread quickly. Some recruits tried to flee toward the shuttle, only to find its engines struggling against the planet's magnetic tantrums. Others shouted for tactical uplinks that no longer existed. The crystalline officer pressed every panel on his rifle until his hands trembled. Marcus took a breath, feeling the familiar shift inside himself. The quiet focus that came only in moments where survival depended on clarity, not pride. "Weapons down," he ordered. "We move low, stay behind cover, and don't waste time trying to resurrect junk that was never built for real war." The recruits looked at him as though he were the only fixed point in a collapsing world. He led them through a jagged ravine, keeping them beneath the path of incoming fire. The Croth did not pursue immediately. They didn't need to. They knew environmental warfare would do the job for them. Inside the shelter of the ravine, Marcus knelt and examined the scorched dust on his glove. "This planet eats electronics," he said calmly. "Your guns were doomed before we landed." The crystalline officer's voice shook. "Then what do we fight with?" Marcus turned, his expression unreadable but steady. "With something that isn't afraid of sand, heat, or gravity. Something older than your doubts." He opened the crate he had insisted on bringing, the metal hinges groaning as though waking from a long sleep. Rows of brass gleamed within. A belt of cartridges curled like a sleeping serpent atop a weapon built of steel and certainty. The recruits stared, breathless, as Marcus rested his hand on the M249's receiver. Time to learn how real soldiers survive. The aliens regarded the weapon as though Marcus had unearthed a relic from a forgotten religion. The M249 lay across his lap, its steel frame absorbing the harsh light of Varrus with a quiet, ominous confidence. The recruits leaned closer, unsure whether to admire it or recoil from it. The crystalline officer finally spoke, voice thin with disbelief. "You intend to fight the Croth with that? It has no energy core." "That's the point," Marcus said, threading the ammunition belt through the feed tray with practiced precision. "It doesn't need one. It only needs me, gravity, and chemistry that doesn't care if the sky is falling apart." A reptilian recruit clicked his jaw, signaling confusion. "But it is loud, crude, unrefined." Marcus locked the cover with a firm snap. "War isn't refined, and loud can be useful." A tremor rippled through the sand, followed by the distant percussion of Croth rifles testing their range. The aliens stiffened. Marcus felt their anxiety, the sense of helplessness that came from trusting weapons too delicate for the world that now threatened them. He rose to a crouch, set the saw's bipod into the sand, and scanned the ridge. They'll scout before they strike. Stay close, and do exactly what I say. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Their survival depended less on pride now and more on the steady authority in Marcus's voice. The crystalline officer positioned himself beside him, clutching his dead rifle as if hoping it would awaken out of sheer necessity. Minutes stretched tight. Then shadows appeared on the ridge. 2 Croth scouts, rifles slung low, confident in their dominance over a disabled enemy. Marcus inhaled, settling into the familiar tranquility that preceded action. He squeezed the trigger. The saw erupted with a mechanical roar that shattered the stillness like a beast freed from chains. Brass casings spat across the sand. A stream of metal cut through the ridge, forcing the Croth to dive in shock. The aliens beside Marcus flinched, overwhelmed by the ferocity of the weapon's cadence, but their eyes widened with something new. Hope. One scout tried to rise, only to be driven back by a second burst. The Croth retreated behind the ridge, abandoning their advance entirely. Marcus lifted his finger from the trigger and let the barrel cool naturally in the wind. He said nothing for a moment, letting the stunned recruits absorb what they had witnessed. The crystalline officer crouched beside the saw, awestruck. "It did not fail," he whispered. "The storm surged just now. I felt it, and still it fired. That's because it's built to survive the world," Marcus replied. "Not pretend it doesn't exist." Another ripple of gunfire sounded in the distance, farther away now. Marcus recognized the pattern. The Croth were adjusting, evaluating a threat they had not expected. He knew they'd return in greater numbers soon. "We need more than one weapon," the reptilian recruit said, newfound determination steadying his voice. "Can you teach us?" Marcus studied their faces. Fear was still there, but fear with direction, fear willing to learn. "I'll teach you the basics, but you'll have to adapt. Ballistics isn't about elegance. It's about leverage, physics, and grit." He guided them through the mechanics. How to seat a belt, how to clear a jam, how to keep sand out of critical parts without relying on automated maintenance. Their alien hands, clawed, crystalline, soft, or scaled, found new motion in the discipline of practicality. What the saw demanded was not perfection, only commitment. As night approached, the recruits stood around Marcus in a loose defensive circle. The desert hummed with the promise of another attack, but they no longer felt abandoned. They had a weapon that worked, a mentor who understood survival, and a glimpse of a strategy rooted not in spectacle, but in realism. The crystalline officer rested his hand gently on the ammo belt. "Sergeant Hale, what do we do when the Croth return in force?" Marcus checked the horizon, eyes narrowing as he spotted movement far beyond the dunes. "We do what soldiers always do," he said quietly. "We hold the line until they learn fear." The recruits tightened their formation, readying for the coming storm. The desert wind carried the scent of conflict, but for the first time since landing, they felt prepared to meet it. The night on Varrus settled like a shroud of cooling ash, dimming the dunes without muting the tension coiled within the small defensive circle Marcus had shaped from frightened recruits only hours earlier. Now they crouched behind makeshift berms of sand and scrap metal, their postures steadier, their breaths more controlled. The M249 rested at the center of the position, its barrel glinting faintly in the moonlight, as if eager for what approached. Marcus checked the weapon with the casual thoroughness of a man greeting an old friend. The crystalline officer knelt beside him, clutching a crude ballistic carbine the squad had assembled from scavenged plating and mechanical springs. It was bulky and uneven, but when he had test-fired it earlier, it hadn't jammed. That alone made it superior to every plasma weapon the Alliance had carried here. "They're coming," he murmured, voice trembling in resonance. Marcus tilted his head, listening. The Croth moved with predatory confidence, their footwork deliberate, their rifles clicking with mechanical certainty. He felt the faint vibrations through the sand before the aliens behind him even realized they were being surrounded. "Good," Marcus said softly. Let them think we're as helpless as before. The first wave crested the dune, dozens of silhouettes framed against the starlit ridge. Croth rifles angled down, expecting panic. They did not expect the staccato thunder that erupted when Marcus squeezed the trigger. The SAW unleashed a punishing arc of fire, shredding the ridge and sending shards of rock and fleeing silhouettes scattering into the shadows. The recruits flinched only for an instant before rallying, their improvised carbines and slug throwers answering the machine gun's roar with proud, uneven bursts. The ambush forced the Croth to fall back, recalculating their advantage. But the desert no longer belonged to them. It belonged to whoever could fight in its chaos without pleading for technology to compensate. The crystalline officer fired again, the recoil jarring his entire frame, yet determination steadied him. Sergeant Hale, he said between gritted crystalline plates, I believe I understand why your species survived so many wars. Because we don't expect the world to be kind, Marcus replied, sweeping another burst across the flank of the approaching enemy. We expect it to try killing us, and we build from that assumption. The Croth regrouped quickly, sending a second wave down both sides of the ravine. Their strategy was sound. Overwhelm with numbers and force the defenders into close quarters. Marcus recognized the shift even before the shadows deepened along the ravine walls. Shift left, he commanded. Keep the angles tight. Make them come to you. The recruits obeyed instantly. Their earlier fear transformed into fierce focus. Sand kicked into the air as Croth warriors charged down the slope. The reptilian recruit fired point-blank at an advancing Croth, the crude weapon bruising his shoulder but dropping the enemy with a satisfying thud. Surprise flickered across his scaled face, surprise that he, once helpless, could now stand against a trained warrior. Marcus pivoted the SAW toward the narrowing choke point, anchoring the entire defense with relentless suppressive fire. The belt rattled through the receiver, each round a testament to the weapon's enduring purpose. The Croth faltered, hesitating as their armor, designed to deflect plasma, absorbed the blunt force of physical rounds it had never been engineered to resist. Another wave broke, and another. Each collapse chipped away at the Croth's certainty. They came expecting fragile prey. Instead, they found determined defenders with weapons that refused to bow to the storm. When the final group retreated beyond the dunes, leaving the battlefield littered with silence and settling dust, Marcus released the trigger and exhaled. The barrel steamed gently in the cooling night. The crystalline officer looked at him with a mixture of reverence and exhaustion. We held, he whispered. Against all logic, we held. No, Marcus corrected quietly. We adapted. That's what survival really is. The recruits gathered around the SAW as though it were a symbol forged from their own transformation. Their armor was dented, their makeshift guns charred, but their spirits no longer trembled. As dawn crept over the dunes, flickering orange across the battlefield, Marcus rose and slung the empty SAW across his back. The recruits straightened beside him, awaiting instruction not with fear but with conviction. We're not done, Marcus said, gazing toward the horizon where the Croth would regroup. But now they know we're not afraid of fighting dirty. And that changes everything. The desert wind carried his words forward, scattering them like brass across the sands of Varrus, an omen of the battles yet to come.